Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. The first question I'm going to be answering today, there were several questions received by the foundation through email, so I'll start by answering one of them. That is, the question is, the crux of Bhagavan's teachings is that the ego comes into being by grasping form and persists by holding one form after another. To dissolve this ego and return into the source, we have to break this association of ego with forms, as ego cannot exist independently. That is why the practice entails just paying attention only to I am, ourselves, without attaching to anything or identifying or paying attention to anything, just being with the sense I am. My question is, in deep sleep, the ego is in layam state. It is dissolved temporarily into the source. Now, what makes it rise and grasp form? There is no world, form, body consciousness in sleep. So how can ego arise? Because as per Bhagavan, ego arises only by grasping form, while in deep sleep there is no one to grasp and nothing to grasp. So how does ego arise? The first thing to that's the question. The first point to note is that Bhagavan doesn't say that ego comes into being by grasping form, because obviously ego must exist in order to grasp form. So grasping form cannot be the cause of ego coming into existence. What he says in verse 25 of Uludu Napadu is Urupatri Undam. Grasping form, it comes into existence. He doesn't say by grasping form it comes into existence. He just says grasping form. That is, ego coming into existence and its grasping form occur simultaneously. And obviously no form exists independent of ego, because as Bhagavan says in the next verse, verse 26 of Napadu, Ahandayundayan anatamundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandayindrel indruanatam. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Everything here means all phenomena. So it's important to understand ego cannot come into existence without grasping form, but it is not correct to say that it comes into existence by grasping form. It comes into existence grasping form. That is, the very nature of ego is to constantly grasp form. Regarding the question, what is it? What makes ego rise and grasp form? This question is asking for a cause for the rising of ego. Before we consider why ego rises from sleep, we should first consider why ego rises in the first place. And when people ask Bhagavan such questions, what did Bhagavan reply? Bhagavan said, first find that ego and bring it here. Once you've found it, we can then find out how it came into existence. What Bhagavan meant by that is, if we investigate ego, we will find there is no such thing at all. So the question of how it came into existence will no longer arise, because since ego has never come into existence, we cannot find any cause for it coming into existence. The reason, so the first reason why there's no cause for the rising of ego is that ego hasn't actually ever arisen. Ego seems to have arisen because we don't attend to ourselves. Again, that implies a cause. Bhagavan sometimes said the cause for ego is avichara. Avichara means non-investigation. In other words, not attending to ourself. But that is not actually the cause. What Bhagavan means is, if we attend to ourselves, ego will not come into existence. It seems to have come into existence because we're not attending to ourselves. So if we attend to ourselves, we will find it has never come into existence. Ego is the first cause. That is only when, as Bhagavan says in the next verse, verse 26 of Ulunaptu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Everything there implies everything, all phenomena, all objects, all forms, everything other than ourselves. And that includes cause and effect. There's no cause and effect prior to ego. So ego is the first cause. It is the cause of causality. It's the cause of cause and effect. So we cannot find a cause for ego because, firstly, because it never actually has come into existence. If we investigate it, we'll find it has never actually come into existence. Secondly, even so long as we accept that it has seemingly come into existence, the appearance of cause and effect is a result of the rising of ego. So there cannot be any cause for the rising of ego. The only thing that exists prior to the appearance of ego is Brahman, Atma-swarupa, ourself as we actually are. What we actually are, that alone is what exists prior to the rising of ego. That cannot be a cause because what we actually are is just pure being. Cause implies doing something. That is, here when we're talking about cause, we're talking about what is called in Sanskrit as nimitta karana. That is what is in Western philosophy, it's called the efficient cause. If you take the analogy of a table, the material cause of the table is wood. The efficient cause of the table is the carpenter who cut the wood and shaped it and fixed the pieces together. So the carpenter is the efficient cause. And sometimes they also speak about, particularly in Tamil, they talk about tune karanam, the auxiliary causes. In this case, the carpenter's tools are the auxiliary cause. The carpenter's tools cannot be said to be the efficient cause because the tools by themselves cannot make a table. There has to be someone who uses the tools to make the table. So the carpenter is the efficient cause. Brahman can be the cause only in the sense of being the material cause. That isn't to say Brahman is material, but Brahman is the substance that appears as all this. Just like the material cause for the illusory snake is just a rope. In the same way, Brahman is the material cause of this world, but it cannot be the efficient cause, the nimitta karana, because that would imply doing something. And Brahman is pure being. It never does anything. So there is no efficient cause for the rising of ego in the first place. Since there's no cause for the rising of ego in the first place, why should we seek a cause for why ego arises from sleep? If we investigate ego keenly enough, we will find ego has never arisen. So the question of a cause for it rising either in the first place or from sleep doesn't arise. However, people are not satisfied without explanation. We want an explanation for everything. So in the sastras, in the Advaitic texts, the traditional answer that is given as to why ego rises from sleep is because of the vasanas. The vasanas, it is said, exist in sleep in a seed form. And the vasanas are what cause ego to rise. This answer satisfies many people, but it wouldn't satisfy a person who thinks deeply. Because the vasanas are whose vasanas? Obviously, they're ego's vasanas. So vasanas cannot exist independent of ego. So if ego doesn't exist in sleep, how can its vasanas exist? Then some people say, oh, though ego wasn't in a manifest form, it was in a seed form in sleep. That explanation is sometimes given. Again, this is just to satisfy people who want an explanation. But since ego is what grasps form, since, as Bhagavan says, ego comes into existence grasping form, obviously there are no forms in sleep. So what is there to grasp? Some people then another explanation which is given, the vasanas make up the causal body, the Anandamaya kosha or Karana Sarira. That is the form, but ego grasps in sleep. But that may, and the form of that causal body is darkness. So the darkness of sleep is the form that ego is attached to in sleep. This explanation is given. Again, this is not a very satisfactory explanation, because sleep seems to be a dark state only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. When we're actually asleep, we don't complain that it's a dark state. That is, it seems to be a dark state because as ego, we are accustomed to being aware of things other than ourselves. Since we are not aware of anything other than ourselves in sleep, the reason we're not aware of anything other than ourselves in sleep is ego doesn't exist in sleep, therefore nothing else exists. But from the perspective of ego and waking and dream, sleep seems to be a state of darkness in the sense that it's not we don't actually experience darkness in sleep, but it looks like a state of darkness because we were not aware of anything. That is, we were not aware of any phenomena. But we know that we were in that state in which we were not aware of anything. The fact that we know we were in that state means that state wasn't a state devoid of awareness. If it was devoid of awareness, we would not be aware of ever having been in that state. So sleep is clearly a state of awareness, but there's no awareness of objects or phenomena, which is what we as ego take to be knowledge in the waking state. So it seemed to be a state devoid of knowledge, devoid of awareness, whereas actually it's a state of, as Bhagavan clarified, it's a state of pure awareness. Since what exists in sleep is only pure awareness, which always shines in the form of the fundamental awareness I am, that is, it's pure awareness is called pure awareness because it's not awareness of anything. There are no objects of awareness. So it is awareness devoid of content or devoid of objects of awareness. But awareness is always aware I am. It's aware of its own existence. Why is that? Because if we think about it, it's obvious that we cannot be aware without being aware but we are aware. And being aware but we're aware entails being aware but we are. So the awareness I am is the very nature of awareness. So pure awareness is always aware of itself as I am, but never aware of anything other than itself. If it were aware of anything other than itself, it would not be pure awareness. So Bhagavan said, what exists in sleep is only pure awareness. That is what we actually are. If we say that the vasanas exist in sleep, a causal body exists in sleep, or ego exists in a subtle form in sleep, then there's no reason for us to, we would have no reason to conclude that is, if we say ego exists in a subtle form in sleep, then what evidence do we have in our experience that we are not ego? That is why in traditional Advaita, in classical Advaita, one of the prakriyas, one of the means by which we are led to the conclusion but what we actually are is pure awareness. One of the means is the analysis of the three states. We are not this gross body, because this gross body, we're aware of this gross body in waking. We're not aware of this in sleep. We're not aware of this dream body now, so that also cannot be what we actually are. Though we're aware of the same mind in both waking and dream, there's no mind in sleep. So mind is not what we are. Even ego is not what we are, because ego appears in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. If we say ego does exist in sleep, albeit in a seed form, then then the analysis of the three states will not lead to the conclusion that we are not ego. Because if ego exists in all three states, albeit in a manifest form in waking and dream, an unmanifest form in sleep, still, why shouldn't that ego be what we actually are? So the analysis of the three states is based on the understanding, the correct understanding, that in sleep, there's no ego at all. There's nothing other than pure awareness. Because if there were anything other than pure awareness in sleep, that other thing could be what we actually are. So the trying to explain the arising of ego from sleep is, firstly, we have to posit something in sleep that causes ego to rise. Either we have to posit vasanas, but the vasanas are ego's vasanas, so how can they exist in the absence of ego? So we have to then say ego exists there, but the nature of ego is grasping form. There's no form to grasp in sleep. So trying to find a cause for the rising of ego is futile. As Bhagavan said, first find this ego. If you can catch this ego and bring it here, then we can find out how it came into existence. Bhagavan said that in a joking way, but what he meant is, if you look for ego, you will find no such thing. As he says in the verse 17 of Upadesha Undiyar, Manatinuruvei Maravadu Chava Manamenamondrile Undipara, Markam Nerakam Idundipara. If one investigates without forgetting, if one investigates the form of the mind without forgetting, the form of the mind here means it's the real nature of the mind without forgetting. Manam enum ondrile, there's no such thing as mind at all. Markam nerakam idu. This is the direct path for all. And as he says, for example, in verse 25 of Uludunapatu, Tedinal otum pidicum. If seeking it takes flight, that means if ego seeks its own reality, it will run away, it'll disappear, it'll cease to exist, is the implication. So there is no such thing as ego. Ego seems to exist. Because ego seems to exist, everything else seems to exist. But ego seems to exist only because we do not investigate it. We do not investigate ourselves. We do not try to see what we actually are. Now we are constantly attending to other things. So we're looking away from ourselves. Because we're looking away from ourselves, we seem to be ego. But if we turn our attention back to ourselves to see who is this ego, no such thing as ego is there to be found. What actually we are is just pure awareness. So if we investigate who am I, we will find that we are not this ego, we are only pure awareness. Just like a rope seems to be a snake, so long as we don't look at it carefully enough. If we look at it very carefully, what will we see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's only a rope. Likewise, if we look carefully at what now seems to be ego, we will find what it actually is only Satchit, pure being awareness. So since ego has never actually existed, we cannot find any cause for it coming into existence. Ego is the cause for everything else. So long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, then who is aware of that? It's only as ego that we're aware of other things. So ego is the cause of all other things, but ego has no cause, because if we investigate it, we'll find there's no such thing as ego at all. This question was asked by Parani, who I think is here today. Parani, is that a clear answer to your question, or do you have any further questions to ask on this?
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for explaining it. If my understanding of what you answered, let me articulate it.
Right.
So, it is like it is futile to even look into the source or the cause of the ego being risen up, because it will not take you anywhere. So
Yes.
the smarter way is to, as Bhagavan would have said, to see if ego really exists. I think that would be the better question than spending the effort in trying to find out what is the cause of ego rising up from the sleep. Yeah, yeah, that is what I could understand.
Ego does have a source, but it doesn't have a cause. It must have a source because it has to arise from somewhere. But if we investigate it, we will find actually the cause of ego, the source of ego alone is what actually exists.
Yeah.
It has a source, but it has no cause.
Yeah. Yes. And when we go into the sleep, and each and every day when we go to the sleep, the ego goes back to the source. And in the deep sleep state where there is no dream, there is no awareness of anything. So during the deep sleep state, what exists is just the pure awareness of Brahman.
Yes, the pure awareness, that is Brahman.
That is Brahman.
Yes.
But next day when we seem to rise and wake up from the sleep, the possible explanation, as you said, from the classical Advaita,
yes.
Again, just to consider if you have to satisfy the mind in terms of the question, the reason could be because of the vasanas or the seed forms that triggers one from the sleep, and then get up, and then depending on the vasanas, you continue in the world, etc.
Yes.
Okay.
For people who don't think very deeply, that seems to be a satisfactory answer.
Yeah. So there's a question corresponding to vasanas, as you were explaining. So the vasanas which are in the seed form is what drives the likes and dislikes, etc. There could be Shubha vasanas, there could be Ashubha vasanas, it could be anything, but that is what drives the activity of an ego. And when we try to do self-enquiry, and when we try to pay attention to only ourselves, there could be multiple vasanas which could pull our attention outside and move us towards outward. And every time when we know that our attention has moved out because of certain vasanas, it could be even a Shubha vasanas. For example, I might try to pay attention to myself, but there could be an image of God Shiva, or even an image of Bhagavan coming into picture, which is even a Subha Vashna, but again, it is just an image that is coming in the movement of the mind or the ego, which again have to go back. So when we do the practice of Atma-vichara, this to and fro goes back again and again. Your vasanas tends to pull you out, and then you come back. And while you were answering this question, the other thought that I had is, see this. So me right now considering myself as an ego, though we are doing enquiry, and this ego has got some set of vasanas from multiple births in the seed form. Does it mean that until and otherwise all these vasanas are extinguished completely, I will not be able to be stabilized in my pure awareness? So is it dependent on my set of vasanas that I carry, the strength of my inquiry, or the strength of me abiding in the I am becomes much more better? For example, if I have too much of vasanas, which means I might keep on continuing doing inquiry, but my attention would have been going out. I have to come back again and again because I carry so much of vasanas compared to one other person who has got very little vasana. And because he has got very little vasana, he is able to abide in the pure in the I amness or in oneself very easily without getting much disturbed. So he is able to abide there and strengthen there and get into the source very faster. So is it fair to say, depending on the size or depending on the capacity of vasana one carries, their abidance in the pure I am strengthens?
Yes, yes. That is very two types of vasanas. There's Vishaya vasanas and Satvasana. Vishaya means objects or phenomena. In other words, anything other than ourself is a Vishaya. So the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves, the inclination to seek happiness in things other than ourselves, those inclinations are called Vishaya vasanas. The opposite of Vishaya vasanas is Satvasana. Sat means pure being. That pure being is what we actually are. So the inclination to attend to ourself, the love to attend to ourself, is what is called Satvasana. Vasanas gain their strength from us. That is, vasanas have no strength of their own. Vasanas means inclinations. It's our own inclinations. So whatever strength vasanas seem to have is strength that we have given them. How we give vasanas strength is by allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, the stronger that will become. The more we refrain from being swayed by it, the weaker it becomes. This is how self-investigation weakens the Vishaya vasanas and strengthens the Satvasana. Because when we are attending to ourselves, we are attending to ourselves under the sway of Satvasana. So the more we attend to ourselves, the more we are strengthening the Satvasana. And to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby refraining from attending to anything else. By refraining from attending to anything else, we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas. So when Bhagavan says, for example, in the 6th paragraph of Nana, Ipati Paraka Paraka Manataku Tan Pirapidatil Tangi Nikam Shakti Adikadikindradu. That means by practicing and practicing in this way, for the mind, the strength to abide in its birthplace increases. Its birthplace means its source, in its own being. So that strength to abide there increases. The strength to abide there is the strength of Satvasana. So the more we practice this, the more we are strengthening Satvasana. And to the extent to which we strengthen Satvasana, we are correspondingly weakening the Vishaya vasanas.
Yeah.
So obviously, the stronger our Satvasana is at the outset, but the quicker it will be. But it does, we don't have to be concerned. Let our Satvasana be strong or weak. Let our Vishaya vasanas be strong or weak. We are where we are now. So if we want to progress from where we are now, we need to strengthen the Satvasana and weaken all the Vishaya vasanas. And the means to do so is to persevere in this practice of self-investigation. As Bhagavan makes very, very clear in Nana. That sentence I just read, that is from the 6th paragraph of Nana, where he describes however many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought arises, we need to investigate to whom it arises. Investigating to whom it arises means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. By practicing and practicing in this way, and once we turn our attention back, we should try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. That's what Bhagavan says in the next sentence. If one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. When he said the mind will return, if one investigates who am I, he means if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, the mind will thereby return to its birthplace. In other words, it will subside. And by practicing and practicing this way, the mind will gain that strength to remain firmly established in its birthplace. So he clearly indicates it there in the 6th paragraph. In the 10th and 11th paragraph, he also makes it very clear. But the vasanas, the Vishaya vasanas, will be destroyed to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to which we hold on to Swarupa Dhyana, self-meditation, in other words, self-attentiveness.
Yeah. Again, the question that I had was, I get your response in terms of the inclination to attend to ourselves weakens the Vishaya vasanas. But the amount of Vishaya vasanas that we carry, should that be completely extinguished and to stabilize in the I am? That is what my question is. Because
that's another thing. That is, we cannot completely extinguish all Vishaya vasanas because it is the very nature of ego to have Vishaya vasanas. If we want to extinguish all vasanas, we need to extinguish the root of all vasanas, which is ego. So what is called vasanakshaya, the destruction of all vasanas, is a synonym for manonasa, the destruction of the mind, which means eradication of ego. So, but in order to eradicate ego, we need to weaken the Vishaya vasanas to a considerable extent. Because so long as our Vishaya vasanas are still strong, we won't be willing to go within deep enough to surrender ourselves completely. So by self-investigation, we are weakening the Vishaya vasana, strengthening the Sat vasana. We'll finally reach a point where the Sat vasana is stronger than all the Vishaya vasanas combined. Then only will we be willing to hold on to ourselves so firmly that we are destroyed completely. So the complete eradication of vasanas is our aim, but we cannot achieve that without eradicating ego. But we cannot eradicate ego without greatly weakening the Vishaya vasanas.
Yeah. Yeah. So it does not matter how much of Vishaya vasanas one carries or what kind of vasanas one carries from multiple birth, but until and otherwise we focus on manonasha, because that is the root of all the vasanas. So that should be sufficient, but the means to reduce our inclination to Vishaya vasanas is by practice of the self-attention and developing the inclination to Sat vasanas. But do other means also help? When I say other means, for example, there could be a time during the day or during some time where your mind is not inclined to even sit and do inquiry. So can I still try doing a japa, or maybe reading about Bhagavan, or even doing a parayanam of Akshara Manamale? So would that actually help in weakening my Vishaya vasanas and help me? Because there are times where you spend whole day in the office and come back home and you sit and try doing self-enquiry where your mind doesn't support, your body doesn't support. So probably, is there any other means to reduce this Vishaya vasanas? And the second part is, which at least I have observed myself, Michael, that even though deep in the heart you have that the bhakti for Bhagavan and his teaching, and you want to follow it, and you know that it is important, that vasana is there, but there are sometimes some of the other vasanas which is so dense and which is so powerful. I know you did say that no, they don't have any power until you give the attention towards it. But in reality, at least in the experience, you unconsciously get pulled into the power of that vasanas, and you get lost into it, and only after retrospective you tend to come back and understand, okay, I think I got lost into it, I got swayed completely into it, and then retrospective come back. But many times those 3-4 key seed that is inherent in you, which has been there for long year, it overpowers you without your awareness.
That is, I didn't say that vasanas have no strength. I said they have no strength of their own. Whatever strength they have, they derive from us. So we have already invested so much strength in these Vishaya vasanas. That is because we've been willingly allowing ourselves to be swayed by these Vishaya vasanas over so many crores of janmas, countless lives. We've been so these vasanas, they are very strong, but the strength they have is strength they derive from us. So we who have given them strength, we can deprive them of strength by not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So Bhagavan sometimes said the whole spiritual path is nothing but a battle within our own heart, within our own will, between the Vishaya vasanas on one hand and the Sat vasana on the other hand. Regarding other practices, if we are trying to follow Bhagavan's path, this should be our central focus. And what is most helpful in this is that is in classical Advaita, they often talk about Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. This is a very practical thing. Nididhyasana means the actual attending to ourselves. But we can attend, in order to attend to ourselves, we need to have a certain level of understanding. If we don't understand, but we are not any of these Panchakosha, we're not any of the five sheaths, we're not any phenomenon whatsoever, we would easily, thinking we're attending to ourselves, will be attending to something other than ourselves. So because this is a very deep and subtle path, we need a deep and subtle understanding. And that deep and subtle understanding doesn't come overnight. We need to read Bhagavan's teachings very attentively, pay close attention to what he says in order to understand, in order to grasp what he is saying. We also need to make sense of it. So paying close attention to what he said, that is called Sravana. That is, Sravana literally means hearing, but it means studying his teaching very closely. For that, we need to read them repeatedly. And making sense of them is what is called manana. That is, we read what Bhagavan has written, but do we understand it? Does it make sense to us? We need to think about it carefully and deeply in order to get a clear understanding of why, of what he means. So the Sravana and Manana are both very necessary. These are the greatest support to Nididhyasana. So at times when we feel that we don't have so much inclination to attend to ourselves, at such time, the best supporting practice is Sravana and Manana. And that also includes reciting Aksharammalai. Because Aksharammalai is, that is in works like Nana, Uluduna, Padu, Upadeshundia, Atma-vichara, Bhagavan is laying down the basic principles of his teachings. So we need to study these carefully in order to understand what it is Bhagavan is teaching us. But when it comes to putting this into practice, we come across so many obstacles in the form of our own vasanas. That Aksharammalai is about the practical application of all these principles. So if we recite Aksharammalai, we meditate on the meaning of Aksharammalai, and the other Navamanimvalai, Patikam, Ashtikam, Pancharatnam, all these 5 hymns, this will help us greatly in this path. Because that's all, that, as Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means love. That love is what is otherwise called satvasana. So we want to strengthen that satvasana. So by when we do manana on Bhagavan's teachings, of course, we need to understand the basic principles. So studying repeatedly, Uludunapti, Upadeshundia, Nana, Atma-vichara, all these works, that's very necessary. But it is greatly supplemented by Arunachal Stuti Panchakam. So our Sravana Manana should include not only the philosophical works, the works that are giving the basic principles and what we need to do, but Aksharam is the motivation, the driving force, the love with which, because without love, we will never, we cannot succeed in this path without love. So this reciting Aksharam with not merely reciting it mechanically, thinking deeply about what Bhagavan is saying here, feeling the emotion, the love with which Bhagavan is singing those verses, that is a very, very great aid in this path.
Michael?
Yes?
We are building up questions. I'm just
okay. Can I just say one more thing? Because I didn't actually quite complete my answer to Parani's question. That is, the other question that arises is, why does ego rise from laya, sleep or coma or nirvikalpa samadhi or whatever, but doesn't rise from nasa? The difference between laya and nasa is that is in the actual state of laya or nasa, what remains is only pure awareness. So in the state, there is no difference. But so why do we come out of laya but not come out of nasa? It's all to do with how we go into that state. In the case of sleep, we go into laya because of tiredness. In the case of coma, we go into that state maybe because of an overdose of drugs or because of a head injury or something. In the case of nirvikalpa samadhi, we go into that layer by means of pranayama, meditation, various types of all the various yoga practices that we can go into that state of laya. If we go into a state, but laya and nasa are both states of dissolution of mind, as Bhagavan points out in verse 13 of Upadeshundiya. The difference is that what's in laya will rise again, what is in nasa will never rise again. So how to achieve that nasa? In the case of nasa is brought about only by self-investigation. That is, by investigating ourselves, we become aware of ourselves as we actually are. When we become aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego is thereby dissolved. In the case of manolaya, ego is dissolved by some other means, and what then remains is pure awareness. So in the case of laya, ego subsides by some means, whether by tiredness or by yoga practices or by some injury or whatever, it subsides in a state of laya. It dissolves in laya. But because it's not, it didn't go into that state by being aware of itself as it actually is, it rises again because it hasn't been destroyed. So in sleep, ego doesn't exist, but it hasn't been eradicated. The manonasa hasn't been achieved, so it will rise again. In the case of manonasa, ego subsides, ego dissolves as a result of being aware of itself as it actually is. Because it's, when we are aware of us, that is, ego is a false awareness of ourself. It's awareness of ourself as I am this body. So because ego is a false awareness of ourselves, it can only be destroyed by correct awareness of ourselves. To be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to attend to ourselves alone. If we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will then be aware of ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as we as ego are aware of ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and we remain as pure awareness. In the case of laya, ego dissolves and then the pure awareness alone remains. So because ego has ceased to exist, albeit only temporarily, it cannot be destroyed. So in the case of Manolaya, ego is first dissolved and pure awareness remains. In the case of Manonasa, ego experiences itself as pure awareness and is thereby destroyed and thereby dissolved, and that is permanent. So it's a matter of which comes first. If ego subsides first, before the pure awareness alone remains, that is laya. If ego experiences itself as pure awareness and thereby subsides, that is manonasa. Yes, sorry, that was a long answer, but I hope that, I think the question Parni was asking, I think, are questions that are relevant to many of us. So I think it was useful, but now we've got many other questions to deal with.
Yeah, we got about 10 actually.
Yes, I'll try and be quicker with the other ones.
Yeah, okay, all right. So you ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. If there is only non-duality, in brackets one only present, how come we are unable to realize the same in this waking and dream state where we experience multiplicity? In short, practically, how to experience non-duality, please advise, sir.
Non-duality is a state in which there is no multiplicity. So long as we are experiencing, non-duality is always the truth. Even when we're experiencing duality or multiplicity, but what is actually true is only non-duality. But we are not now experiencing non-duality because we're experiencing multiplicity. So long as we experience multiplicity, we obviously cannot experience multiplicity and non-duality simultaneously. So we have to give up experiencing multiplicity. However, merely giving up experiencing multiplicity is not sufficient, because if we give up experiencing multiplicity, we do that every day when we fall asleep. In sleep, we are not experiencing any multiplicity. So sleep is a state of non-duality, a state in which we're experiencing non-duality. But because ego hasn't been destroyed, we rise again. So ceasing to experience multiplicity is necessary, but it is not sufficient. In yoga, they say, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is stopping the mental activity. So that state in which mental activity stops, that is a state devoid of multiplicity. That is what is called nirvikalpa samadhi. I think they have some other term in yoga, actually. They don't use the term nirvikalpa samadhi, but it means the same thing. So nirvikalpa samadhi is a state in which we're not experiencing multiplicity. But because the ego is not destroyed, it will rise again. So as Bhagavan said, nirvikalpa samadhi, the ordinary kevala nirvikalpa samadhi, is a state of manolaya. So from manolaya, ego will certainly rise again. So not experiencing multiplicity is necessary. It is not sufficient. So what is necessary to bring an end to the permanent cessation of experiencing multiplicity? What experiences multiplicity is only ego. The very nature of ego is to experience multiplicity. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project forms, we grasp one of those forms is this body as I, and we are aware of so many other forms. This is the nature of ego. So in order to put a permanent end to the experience of multiplicity, we need to put a permanent end to ego. Ego is, as I just explained, ego is a false awareness of ourself. So ego can be destroyed only by our being aware of ourselves as we actually are. In order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to stop experiencing multiplicity. In other words, we need to withdraw our attention from all other things. But we withdraw our attention from all other things every night when we fall asleep. Ego is not thereby destroyed. So in order to destroy ego, we not only need to withdraw our attention from all other things, we need to fix our attention on ourselves. As Bhagavan says in verse 16 of Upadesha Undya, Veli Videngale Vittu, giving up the external Vishayas, in other words, ceasing to be aware of all phenomena. That's what is implied by that. Letting go of, or giving, or leaving or letting go of. Vittu means either leaving or letting go of all the phenomena. Manam tan oli uru ordale, the mind knowing its own form of light, unmay unichiyam, that is the real awareness. So what does he mean by the mind knowing its own form of light? Its form of light is that pure awareness I am. The mind knowing only I am and nothing else. In other words, the whole attention needs to be turned back to ourselves in order to experience ourselves as the pure awareness I am. Then only will the mind be destroyed. And that is manonasa. So the short answer to how to experience non-duality, we need to experience ourself alone. And in order to experience ourself alone, we need to, now here in the waking or dream state, we need to attend to ourselves more and more keenly. This is the path Bhagavan has shown us, and this is the only way to experience non-duality. Because it should be very obvious to us, but Advaita Abhyasa, the practice of non-duality, has to be self-attentiveness. Because if we attend to anything other than ourselves, there is duality. So in order to experience non-duality, we need to attend to ourselves alone. So this practice of Atma-vichara alone is the practice, of non-duality, the Advaita Abhyasa. So that is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Attending to ourselves in order to know ourselves as we actually are. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. Chris, should we?
Yeah, so this is the long question, and then there's a follow-up question which you wanted to have after this one.
Yes.
So let me read this question.
It'll all be answered together, I think.
Right, okay. Do you want the other part now, or leave that?
Better afterwards, I think.
Okay. So, the Mandukya Upanishad by Swami Nikhilananda cleared my doubt about causality, in brackets creation, has and will never happen, and that everything is one's own dream creation. I think Bhagavan Ramana also talked about it, yet in the preface, Nikhilananda talks about how the Mandukya's understanding will help people be better human beings, etc. You may also recall Bhagavan in the archive video interacting with people, including a child, prodding the child gently with a stick. My question is how the portion, in quotes, is possible if everything is one's own dream creation. Mandukya's understanding will help people be better human beings, etc. That's the quote. This seems possible if there is an interface between one's own dream creation and the others. The totality together, one may say, is Maya or Brahman's dream. It also probably suggests that the other living things that we see are equally jivas, each interacting with each other as part of individual dreams and as part of Brahman's dream. But going strictly by Mandukya, causality, it has and never will never happen, and that everything is one's own dream, that quote, it seems it is all Brahman and brooks no argument or discussion. It is how it is period. It is how it is period and beyond all discussion. It is how it is. It is how it is, period, and beyond all discussion, and how this is all brought about is a divine mystery. For example, if Michael James sir, is explaining to his own dream creation through YouTube or through in-person interaction, then how do I, for example, definitely a jiva, am able to benefit from this lecture? Clearly then, Michael James is a jiva and Anand Sundaram, that's the questioner, is a jiva, and some interaction is happening. Perhaps coincidentally, my dream has a dream character called Michael James, sir, and Michael James, sir's dream has a dream character called Anand, both being mutually exclusive, or in brackets, are they mutually exclusive or united by Brahman? Please shed some light when you get time.
Okay. Firstly, we need to understand why the teachings are given. When we are taught that all of this is a dream, the purpose of this teaching is to turn our mind within. That is, if all this is a dream, then who am I, the dreamer? We need to turn our attention back to ourselves and investigate ourselves. That is the purpose. But so long as we're not attending to ourselves, so long as we're looking outwards, we are dreaming. And so long as we're dreaming, the dream seems to be perfectly real. So when we are dreaming, if we are experiencing, as Bhagavan often said, if you're experiencing dream hunger, dream food will satisfy the dream hunger. So what that implies is we have to act in, though all this is a dream, we have to act in this dream in an appropriate manner. So in a dream, there is only one dreamer, but the dreamer experiences itself as a person, one among so many other people. So long as we are dreaming, though what is experiencing the dream is there's only one dreamer experiencing the dream, in that dream there seem to be so many people who seem to be also experiencing the dream. So we behave in this world according to the seeming reality of this world. So when we are hungry, we eat food. If we see another person who is hungry, we give them food. So, but hunger is not only for food. We are all hungry for happiness. We're looking for something which cannot be satisfied by material things. If we are feeling physical, if we're experiencing physical hunger, physical food will satisfy our physical hunger. Physical water will satisfy our physical thirst. But we are all feeling hunger, but goes beyond the physical. We want something that cannot be satisfied by physical food or physical water or any physical thing, cannot satisfy our craving for happiness. So we begin to look for something beyond this material appearance. So this is where the spiritual path begins. We begin to, we understand that all this material existence is just an appearance. To whom does it all appear? We begin to investigate ourselves. So we are experiencing a spiritual hunger, which is why we are drawn to this path. But because so long as we're looking outwards, there seem to be so many other people in this world. Most people are not at all interested in this spiritual path. They may be interested in going to temples, going to churches, going to mosques, going to gurudwaras or synagogues or whatever, because they're still seeking all these material things, and they think this is a means to that. But there are some among us who are not satisfied with all these things. We want something beyond all these material things. So we are drawn to this spiritual path. So just like if we see a hungry person, we don't say, oh, this is my dream, so I'll eat all this food myself. I won't give anything to the hungry person. We share with the hungry person. That's a natural thing to do. Likewise, when people in our dream seem to be having the same hunger that we have, we share the food that Bhagavan has given us in the form of his teachings. So But we need to understand while we are doing this, this is all a dream. This is not merely, we are not here to propagate Bhagavan's teachings, to spread Bhagavan's teachings or anything like that. All this talking about Bhagavan's teaching, we should never lose sight of our aim. The true aim of Bhagavan's teaching is that we should turn within and know what we actually are. Because we still have strong outward going inclinations, we don't yet have sufficient love to turn within. So we keep on allowing our mind to go outwards. And when our mind goes outwards, we find great support in Bhagavan's teaching by studying Bhagavan's teachings and thinking about them and trying to put them into practice. That helps us to go within more and more and more. So we can consider, if someone comes and asks us questions about Bhagavan's teachings, when we try to answer their questions, this is a type of manana. We are going over Bhagavan's teachings, trying to make sense of them, trying to explain them in a way that will make sense to others. This is all part of that. But our aim is not here to enlighten others. We are trying to know who we are. So we should never lose sight of our aim. But as Swami Nikhilananda said in his translation of the Mandukya Upanishad, if we have this understanding that we get from Vedanta, it will definitely help us to be a better human. Because if we're putting this into practice, we will be subsiding more and more. The more we subside, the more we will naturally be a better person. We'll be less selfish, less egotistical. So but this is not our aim. The purpose of Mandukya Upanishad, the purpose of Bhagavan's teachings is not to make us better human beings. It is to make us know what we actually are, which is not a human being at all. But a byproduct of following this path is that we do become better humans, though that is not our aim. So regarding the question about Brahman's dream, Bhagavan has never said this is Brahman's dream, and that if we take that, if we infer from the Mandukya Upanishad that Gaudapada was talking about Brahman, or Mandukya Upanishad is just the Upanishad. In Mandukya Karika, Swami Nikhilananda's translation, he's translated Gaudapada's Karika, which is much bigger. The Upanishad is just some, I think, 12 mantras. The Karika runs to hundreds of verses. So he's translated the whole thing. Gaudapada was the author of the Karika, and he has explained in detail about all this being a dream creation. But the aim of Gaudapada, when he taught us that this is a dream creation, he didn't mean to imply that this is Brahman's dream, because that's a misunderstanding of dream. In a dream, there's only one dreamer, and that one dreamer is the one who is aware of the dream. If we say this is Brahman's dream, then we are implying that Brahman is aware of all this. In other words, Brahman is in ignorance. As Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Vuludunapadu, Nanavam Jnanam Ajnanamam. Awareness of multiplicity is ignorance. So obviously Brahman is not dreaming, because the state of dream is a state of ignorance. What is dreaming is ego. And there's only one ego that is dreaming all of this. But so long as we're looking outwards, in this dream, there seem to be so many other people. And just like now, ego takes itself to be one person. So in the view of ego, it seems that every other person is also an ego and is also seeing the world like it. So we behave in this dream appropriately. So we shouldn't, if we start imagining that this is Brahman's dream, then how are we experiencing Brahman's dream? Then we must be Brahman. Then we need to investigate who am I. But That is Brahman as ego is dreaming all this, not Brahman as Brahman. Brahman as Brahman never dreams anything. It is just pure Satchit, pure being, pure awareness. So let's not confuse ourselves by thinking about Brahman's dream and about others' dreams. Those others appear only in our dream. And the reason we are taught that this is a dream is not to change our outward behavior. And so of course we should be, by learning this is a dream, we should become detached from it. And being detached will modify our behavior to some extent. But it's not to change how we behave in this dream. That's not the aim of this teaching. The aim of this teaching is, if all this is a dream, then who am I the dreamer? We need to investigate ourselves, because that's the only way to put an end to it. So long as there's a dreamer, there'll be dreams. If we want to put an end to dreaming, we need to put an end to a dreamer. But dreamer is ego. So I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. And there's a small follow-on from that.
The follow-on is, I wish to start a spiritual book library business. But if everything is my dream creation, it seems that my endeavor itself will be flawed, since there's no point to teach spirituality to dream creations. Obviously they will not benefit, and for me it seems the worst of occupations I could select for a dream world in which I myself am a dream character. But if I had not known that the world is a dream creation, I actually would have loved it, and in the process even shared some of Bhagavan's wisdom to my subscribers. Can you ask Michael, sir, to throw some light? Regards.
You say that is this person says there's no point to teach spirituality to dream creations. This is missing the point. Supposing you, as I said earlier, supposing you see supposing you've got food, you're eating food and a hungry person comes there. Will you not share your food with others? Will you say, oh, there's no point in sharing my food with a dream creation, so I'll eat it all myself? That would be very selfish. Naturally, if we see a hungry person, there is point in sharing, because even though it's all a dream, supposing I think, it doesn't, this hungry person is just my dream creation, so I need not feed them. I can eat myself, and then I can go to a jewelry shop and think, oh, this is all my dream. Let me take as much jewelry as I want. Let me rob banks. Let me do this, that. Such a selfish attitude will strengthen ego. By sharing what we have, by sharing our food with the hungry person, or if necessary, if that person is really hungry, we give all the food. We can go without one meal. Let that person let that person's hunger be satisfied. By such selfless actions, we are slowly purifying our mind. We are minimizing our selfishness. So long as we are selfish, we're never going to give up ego. So we need to reduce our selfishness. So just like we share what we have, we share our food with a hungry person. We share so many things in life. We share. So if someone is bereaved, we say some kind words to try and share some consolation with them. If someone comes to us with some spiritual hunger, we share with them. To say there's no point in that is misunderstanding. It's the natural thing to do, to share with others. So long as we're dreaming, there seem to be others, and those others seem to be every bit as real as we are. If I think, oh, only my hunger matters, the hungry person's hunger doesn't matter, that is just a complete misapplication of the teaching. So another point to understand is whatever is to happen in this dream is according to prarabdha. If it is your prarabdha to be a business person and to have a spiritual bookshop or be a book library, if that is your destiny, that will happen. Whether you wish it or not, it will happen. Even if you wish it, if it's not your destiny, it's not going to happen. So what we do in our outward life is all according to prarabdha. So let us not concern ourselves with what we should do or what we shouldn't do. Our main aim should be turning within as much as possible. If Bhagavan gives us the inclination to start some business, okay, if that's his will, it will happen. We will feel something will prompt us to start that business and we'll do it. And I mean, most of us are in a position where we need to work to earn a livelihood. At least for some considerable part of our life. When we're children, we don't have to earn a livelihood. Our parents are taking care of us or someone is taking care of us. But when we're adults, most of us have to earn a livelihood. So there are different ways of earning livelihood. It's all according to prarabdha. So let the external life go on as it is anyway going to go on according to prarabdha. The point is, the purpose of what is taught in the Mandukya Upanishad, the purpose of what is taught in the Mandukya Karika, the purpose of what Bhagavan has taught us is to understand that none of this is real. The only what is necessary is to this is all a dream. So who am I, the dreamer? We need to investigate and find out the truth of ourselves. And that will put an end to the dreamer and put an end to all dreams. So I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
Yeah, if the elephant is running at us and shouts, "Get out of the way," the Mahout says, "Get out of the way," then it's best to get out of the way.
Exactly.
Okay, so next question. I have been extensively studying Buddhism in the last year, and all of it is brilliant, but I have a big problem with the Buddha saying that we don't have a self. However, BRM says...
Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, I think that means.
Right. Says that we do have a self. I apologize, I can't go to your satsang because I don't have a computer, but for a while I'm greatly disturbed by this apparent contradiction. Please help.
Okay.
I don't know how we get this answer to him unless we...
Yeah, I think he sees the videos. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So right. Self is not a thing that we have or don't have. It is best to consider the word self to be a pronoun rather than a noun. If we take it to be a noun, it's referring to some specific thing. None of us have a self, because if we have a self, that self is something other than ourself, which makes no sense at all. There's a lot of confusion because people reify the idea of self. They think self is a thing. As I said, it's best to consider the word self to be a pronoun rather than a noun. And everything is itself. This table is itself. This computer in front of me is itself. I am myself. You are yourself. He is himself. She is herself. So there's no separate thing called self, but we either have or don't have. We don't know exactly what Buddha taught, because Buddha didn't leave any teachings in writing. Buddha, from history, but we know of Buddha's life, he after attaining enlightenment, he started to give teachings. He gave discourses, and those a few hundred years later, for some time, those what he taught was passed on by word of mouth, And a few hundred years later, they began to write them down. The earliest texts are the texts written in Pali. There are also other texts written in Sanskrit, which were still later. The Mahayana Buddhists mostly follow the Sanskrit text. The Hinayana Buddhists mostly follow the Hinayana means the Theravada, they mostly follow the Pali text. So we don't know exactly what Buddha said. And after Buddha, there were so many different schools of Buddhist philosophy. There were the Sautantrikas, there were the Chittamatra, there was the Madhyamaka, so many different schools of Buddhism were there. That is, even among the Buddhists, there were different understandings of what Buddha said. But so we don't know exactly what Buddha said, but this teaching of anatta means anatta doesn't mean no self. And anatta is a Pali form of the Sanskrit word anatma. Anatma means not self. It doesn't mean no self. One of the things from which this doctrine arose, one of the statements in the Pali Canon that Buddha said on a number of occasions was sabbe dharma anatta. That means all dharmas are anatma. Dharma in that context means phenomena. So all phenomena are not self. This is exactly what Bhagavan teaches us. We are when he says not self, he means it implies they are not one self. They are not what we actually are. So this is the core teaching of Advaita and Bhagavan's teachings. We are not any object. We're not any phenomena. So we are not this body, we're not this mind, we're not anything. Likewise, Buddha was implying the same, but none of these phenomena are what we actually are. He's not saying that phenomena are not themselves. That would make no sense. To say this PC is not itself, this table is not itself, this light is not itself, this microphone is not itself, that would be meaningless. He's saying these things are not ourself. Just like this table and this chair and other things are not myself, this body is also not myself, this mind is not myself. So if it's understood correctly, I think what Buddha was teaching and what Advaita is teaching are one and the same thing. But after these, Sadhu Om used to often say, the followers of the swallowers of the master's principles. So we have great souls like Buddha and Krishna and Bhagavan and so on. They come and give some teaching. The followers take it in their own way. As Bhagavan said, that according to the purity of the antakarana, the same teaching reflects in different ways. The antakarana means the inner or instrument, that is the mind, manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahankaram. The mind, the intellect, the will, and the ego. According to the purity of this inner instrument, the same teaching will reflect in different ways. So even Bhagavan's teachings, where Bhagavan is so clear and so unambiguous in his teachings, but still people have understood it in so many different ways. So inevitably, after a teaching is given, there will be people who come who will interpret it in different ways. So what we have now in the form of Buddhism is the many, many generations of interpretations. So what Buddha actually taught and how it's been misunderstood by people along the way, we don't know. But I think it is safe to assume it would make no sense if you say there's no such thing as self. That means there's no thing at all, because everything is itself. And there's obviously no self other than the thing whose self it is. So to say there's no self would be complete nihilism. It's saying there's nothing at all. So I don't believe that is what Buddha was saying. So, but people, his teachings have been interpreted in so many different ways by different people. Just like inevitably, Vedanta has been, there's so many different interpretations of Vedanta, all based on the same Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutra. There's so many different interpretations. Even among Advaitins, there's so many different understandings of Advaita. So the thing is, we need to understand things correctly. So we need to study. Well, we are very fortunate to have Bhagavan, because Bhagavan, unlike other acharyas, Bhagavan hasn't written any commentary on the Upanishads or the Brahma Sutra or the Bhagavad Gita. But Bhagavan has given us the essence of all of Vedanta in his teachings. So if we are wise, we'll study Bhagavan's teachings and try our best to put it into practice without worrying about all these different interpretations, different understanding that different people have. It's inevitable that things will be understood differently. Even among Bhagavan's devotees, people have understood his teachings in different ways. We have to go back to the original source, read Bhagavan's own teachings and try to understand them and put them into practice. That is what is required. So I hope that's an adequate answer to that question.
Okay, the next question is quite a simple one. What is the meaning of life?
Does that mean what is the purpose of life? Whatever meaning or purpose that is, we each give a different meaning or a different purpose to our life. For some people, the purpose of life is earning lots of money and enjoying lots of pleasures. Some people, the aim of life is gaining name and fame. Other people, the aim of life is to develop some skill, to be a great musician or a great sports person or whatever. But whatever, anything we achieve in the course of this life is like something we achieve in a dream. When we die, it all goes away. We may be the richest person in the world. We may be the most famous person in the world. We may be the most, the best musician, a great singer or a great pianist or whatever. We may be a world champion sports person. We may achieve so many things. Or we may just have a happy, contented life with our family and living a simple life. Whatever we achieve in this life, it will all go away. So that is not the true purpose of life. The true purpose of life is something that we need to make use of this life to achieve something beyond this material life. Any material achievement will pass away along with this body. So we need to seek something. We need to seek the reality behind all this appearance. As Bhagavan says, all this is a dream. What is the reality? We cannot find reality in the dream. The dream is all entirely unreal. If we are to find the reality, we can only find the reality within the dreamer. Because though the dreamer may be unreal as a dreamer, there has to be an element of reality in the dreamer. Because if there was no reality at all in the dreamer, there would be no dreamer and no dream. So the fact that we are dreaming all this means that we exist. We may not be what we seem to be, but we do exist. So the aim of life, the purpose of life, the meaning of life is to find out who am I. We can, that's if we're sensible, we'll come to that conclusion. Most people don't come to that conclusion. They think there's so many other purposes people have in life. Let people, we have been pursuing so many purposes, so many meanings through so many lives. Now at least let us come back to the basic thing, to know the truth of ourselves. Who am I?
Would you like the next question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Please could you talk about Bhagavan's writings about Arunachala and how those writings relate to self-attentiveness? Having not read much in any of these writings, it is still in darkness for me. Which would be a good text to start investigating?
Well, a very good one is Aksharamlai. That is one thing about Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, 5 hymns, of which Aksharamlai is one of them. If we observe them superficially, it seems to be Bhagavan worshipping a mountain, and he takes that mountain to be God. So it's a hymn in praise of an external form of God. That's if we view it very superficially. But if we pay close attention to what Bhagavan is actually saying there, the true form of Arunachala, though Arunachala appears outwardly in the form of a hill, the true form of Arunachala is what is shining in our heart as I. He so often repeats, but you're shining in the heart as I. And in verse 2 of Arunachala Pancharatnam, he says, you're always dancing in the heart as I. So the Arunachala that Bhagavan is singing to and praising to, though it appears outwardly in the form of a hill, it is ever shining in our heart as our own being, as I am. So, and if we pay close attention to what Bhagavan is saying in those verses, it's all about that. It is the Aksharamlai, for example, is written in the form of of what is sometimes called bridal mysticism, Matarabhava. Bhagavan takes himself to be a girl, Arunachala to be her beloved, and Arunachala has abducted this girl from her home and kept her prisoner in the cave of his heart. So it's all, a lot of it is allegorical, but what it's all about is about this same path of self-investigation. But it's all about the practical application of this and the importance of the love. That is, as Bhagavan makes clear in Atma-vichara, for example, knowing ourselves is extremely easy. And of all the means to know ourselves, this path is the most easy, this path of self-investigation. But love is required. Grace is required, and for that, love is required. So the love and grace are just, that is the love that God has for us, we call grace. The love that we have for God, we call bhakti. So bhakti and grace, they go hand in hand. And whatever bhakti we have, whatever love we have for God, is love that we get. Because God is shining in our heart, he gives us that love for him. So the meaning of Aksharamlai and the other hymns, they're extremely deep in meaning. They can be understood at different levels. As I say, it can be superficially, we can understand it as a worship of a name or form of God. But it actually has much, much deeper meaning. The deeper meaning is not contradicting the superficial meaning. Bhagavan did have love, great love for the outward form of Arunachala, because he saw that outward form of Arunachala as an outward manifestation of what is ever shining in my heart as I. So I mean, they're so deep and so rich in meaning. We could go on and on talking about, we can take each verse and analyze the meaning of it and everything. But to really experience the impact of it, we need to read the verses and feel it for ourselves. Because the question is very general, I've given a general answer, but we could spend a lifetime contemplating the meaning of Aksharamala, and it is such a deep poem. But we will understand the depth of meaning only to the extent to which we go deep in this path. If we're not truly following this path, we won't truly understand the meaning of these songs. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. I'm sure it's not, but at least within the limited time we have available.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
That's sufficient, is it then?
I will go back to Michael's site and read there. So thank you.
Right.
Okay, right. So then the next question. Not being a hunch, what is intuition in the following dialogue extract? And the heading is a dialogue with the Maharshi 3 Mountain Path by Narasimha Swami. Devotee, I am now convinced that it must be so, but I do not yet feel it clearly. I do not feel this unrelated or absolute happiness transcending the intellect. Maharshi, that is because of the fact that it has long been your habit to think of and identify yourself with other objects, and that you have never faced your I in the above manner. You have always been exercising your intellect and never your intuition. And then, if now reverse your course and take to inward vision, shutting out all external images and falling back on intuitive feeling, in that dark chamber of your mind, you will catch the true picture of yourself. So it's about intuition, basically.
Right. Bhagavan would have said, whatever he said, he would have said it in Tamil. B.V. Narasimha Swami has translated it into English. I honestly don't know what word Bhagavan would have used there, but I don't think intuition is an appropriate term to use in this regard, because an intuition is something that we feel we know, but we don't know how we know. But we don't need intuition to know I am. But one thing that is very, very clear, but clearer than any other thing, is the awareness I am. We all know that we exist. So intuition really doesn't come into the picture. We all know I am. The problem is, though we know that I am, we don't know what I am. So we need to investigate ourselves to find out what we are. And in order to investigate ourselves, the only means by which we can investigate ourselves is by attending to ourselves. So there's no word Bhagavan uses in his original writings that can appropriately be translated as intuition. So I think it's a very unhelpful term to use in this context. What term Bhagavan would have used, we don't know, because Bhagavan would have spoken in Tamil, and Narasimha Swami has written it in his own words in English, according to his own understanding. So we'd have to ask B.V. Narasimha Swami, who is long gone, so we don't know. It's a simple answer to that.
I mean, have you ever heard the term used in any of other Bhagavan's writings, intuition? I don't suppose so.
It may be not. There's no word in Bhagavan's original writings or in Guru Vachakakavai recorded by Murugan that can appropriately be translated as intuition. So I don't think I just don't feel it's an appropriate term to use in the context of Bhagavan's teachings.
Okay. So now
Because
we
we're
have,
seeking clear and certain knowledge. But one thing we are all certain about is our own existence, our own being, I am. We now, or what we are seeking to know is what I am. So this path is a path of clarity. It's not a path of, there's something always a little bit vague about intuition. We can never be sure that our intuitions are correct. Whereas the knowledge we are seeking is the certain knowledge.
and the very word tuition, of course, implies teaching, so it's teaching us something.
Yes, I don't know exactly what the etymology of one seems some Swami of the Ramakrishna mission used to say when people asked him about intuition, he said, "We don't believe in intuition here. We believe in tuition." That is, we believe in teaching and studying all these texts. So that's his take on it. But Bhagavan's path is a path of investigation, turning our mind within to know what we actually are. So it's investigation, introspection, but not intuition.
Okay. So there's something here, I'm not sure if it's a question or not. Sadhajiva has put something up. He says, it's possible that it is self's agenda to simply exist in waking state after sleep state. I think he brought that up during your initial...
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
It is possible that it is self's agenda to simply exist in the waking state after sleep state. Question. Wow.
What do you mean by self's agenda? That is, it's ego's agenda, but it's not the agenda of what we actually are. What we actually are has no agenda other than just to be as it is. So all this, what we are now suffering the consequences of ego's agenda. And we who are suffering are ego. Not what we actually are is unaffected by ego and its agenda. So if we know what we actually are, we will not be affected by ego or its agenda. In fact, we will know there's no such thing as ego at all.
Okay, so the next question. Can the state of pure awareness be imagined like darkness without five sense impressions and thoughts?
As ego, we can imagine anything, but pure awareness as it is cannot be an imagination, because pure awareness, what knows pure awareness is only pure awareness. And the nature of pure awareness is absolute. It's beyond the mind. It's beyond the mind. So how can it be an imagination? Imagination is a mental fabrication. So we can imagine anything, but that whatever we imagine is not pure awareness. As Bhagavan says in the first Mangalam verse of Uludunapadu, that Ullaporul, the existing substance or reality, exists in the heart, Ullalara, without thought. So it's beyond all imagination, beyond all mental fabrication. It's just pure being.
Okay, so the next question. What is the difference between realization and liberation?
It depends what we mean by these terms. According to Bhagavan, liberation is destruction of ego, as he says very clearly in the final verse of Uludunapadu. If we choose to call that realization, well and good. Bhagavan actually used to sometimes would joke about the English term realization. Though he didn't generally speak much in English, sometimes he would he could express himself in English if he wanted to. And he sometimes said about realization, what is real is always real. It doesn't need realization. The problem is that we've unrealized the unreal. Sorry, the problem is that we've realized the unreal. In other words, we've made the unreal seem to be real. So all that is required is not to realize the real, which is always realized. We need to unrealize the unreal. So in other words, the root of all unreality is ego. Destruction of ego. When ego is destroyed, what alone is real alone will remain. So if you want to call that realization, you can call it realization. If you take that to be realization, then realization and liberation are one and the same thing. But people give so many different meanings to all these terms. Even liberation is understood differently by different people. Different schools of, that is, all in Hinduism, all the different sects and philosophies, they all talk about liberation, but they have so many different ideas about liberation. For some, going to live in Kailasha with Shiva, or going to live in Vaikuntha with Vishnu, or going to live in Goloka with Krishna, that is liberation. So there's so many different ideas of liberation. That's why Bhagavan's conclusion is that the destruction of ego that distinguishes all these different types of liberation, that alone is real liberation. And that is realizing what is ever real. Because when ego is destroyed, reality alone remains.
Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Yes.
This is, I think, Angelica has put a message. Can she ask a question? She hasn't spelled it out, so I guess she may be there to put it in person. Angelica?
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for, I know that is through you and we are all one, and I know that there's no one to, why do I say thank you? As if it's for me. It's not for me, really. It's for the one ego to realize, well, if this for this information, then it's for the ego to realize that it doesn't exist and it has to go back, or this actually, if the one is already what it is, I guess this just came out. I don't know why, but who is it? Who am I thanking to? But I feel like a great appreciation, and I feel like I want to say thank you. I'm not sure.
Right. That is, all these teachings are coming from Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is our own self. He is what we actually are. So ultimately, the thanks are to Bhagavan, who is ourself as we actually are. But the way to express our gratitude to him is to follow the path that he has shown us. Is that a helpful answer?
Yes, thank you. I guess before I listen to all the answers, it's kind of also clarified, but I was going to ask something that, I guess through this apparent dream in here, the imagination that went through, and it keeps, life apparently, as it seems, it keeps going. It has been showing that a lot of times when I very, very deep into these teachings, and I really get very, very deep, that I really discard everything, but I keep going with what is needed. a lot of times it's been found that life is kind of like shaking me and be like, hey, wake up, this is not what it is. You have to be attent here because this and this and this, and things gets like very aggressive, and then I have to be like, okay, I go and I attend, and then I kind of still stay from this awareness, and I'm still responding like, I know that I don't have to grasp anything, and it seems like the ego is like reflected, and others is trying to say like, hey, wake up, like why you're not acting like you need this, you need that, you have to desire this, you have to attend here. And sometimes it kind of still makes me feel like, well, what is the dream? Am I dreaming that there is actually a teaching and is the heart, or am I dreaming the other side? But I've been seeing like I'm gonna test it on the side that is actually the other is the dream, and eventually things has been sorted in a way that it actually come to the right place, even though that I don't attend to them. Like it seems like it takes care by itself as long as I do what I can, but not striving, not fighting. Like I just go with the flow, and even if it's hard to explain. But there's a few times where the next day I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't attended to so many things, and what's gonna happen? And then I keep going, and I keep seeing like, does it make sense? And I just go back, and I'm like, this is the same, it's all one. And I see people that I really appreciate it and has passed. And I see from their perspective, if they will be here and they will see my life is like now my parents are gone, and if they will see how much they were fighting in the past and everything, and I cannot see in my imagination from their perspective, and I can see that it's still, this confirms that the real truth is the I am, not the actual dream. So I guess that's where I'm sometimes I am going through, and
Jesus.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't really understand what your question is.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give an answer, but I may not be answering you correctly.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, even when ego, or what we consider to be life, demands that we should attend it, and it throws a lot of things, like right now with a lot of economic stresses and like a lot of things going on. And if we stay in the I am and we attend to it without striving, without fighting, without the instinct of me, right? Is that the right way to go? Because sometimes I'm confusing this part. If God is also outside, like I see others as God too.
Yeah.
So then they demand to me like, hey, this, and then I'm like, I try and everything, but I don't strive. I don't go like desperate, and I don't run away. I guess that's my.
Bhagavan's path is a path of turning back within. The external life, according Bhagavan has made clear to us, is all determined by prarabdha. That everything is happening according to the will of God. So we need not concern ourselves with the external life, how we should live in this world, how we should behave. We will be made to behave, we will be made to act in accordance with our prarabdha, that is, in accordance with what is meant to happen. We will be made to act accordingly. So we need not concern ourselves with the outward life. What we need to do is to turn within more and more and more. The more we turn within, the more we will subside back within, and we will be unconcerned about the external world. But that's only to the extent to which we turn within and try to hold on to ourselves. So we all face problems in the external world. There are any manner of problems in the external world. But there's nothing we can do to solve those problems. That is what is to be. We need not concern ourselves with the external life, how we should behave in this world, what we should do. We'll be made to act in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. So our focus should be on trying to turn within. And I think you were saying something about God out there. So long as we take ourselves to be a person, God seems to be something other than ourselves. So we have some idea about God out there, up in heaven or in the temple or in the church or whatever it is. But where God, where God is most intimately present is in our own heart. God is what is shining in our heart as I. So if we want to surrender ourselves to God, we need to hold on to this fundamental awareness, I am. So, again, I'm not sure whether I'm answering your question adequately because it wasn't very clear to me what you were asking.
Yes, it does answer. So, yeah, because when I refer to, like, I see also God in other people, but first I will put it in the I am,
But
and then the rest.
how can we see God in other people when we don't see God in ourselves? So we first need to see God in ourselves by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. Okay.
Right, so the question is, when we wake up from deep sleep, is it correct to say that the ego says, I slept well?
Yes, that is what is aware. Whatever we say or think about sleep now, it is as ego that we are saying that. But ego wasn't present in sleep. We were present in sleep as pure being awareness, but we were not present as ego. But that pure being awareness is the reality of ego. That is, ego is the adjunct conflated awareness. I am this body, I am this person. What existed in sleep is not ego, but only I am. But because ego is a conflation of that fundamental awareness I am, and whatever person we now take ourselves to be, ego is able to recollect that its existence, its existence in sleep. But so we say, I slept well. I didn't have any dream. I had a very peaceful sleep, very pleasant sleep. It was very relaxing. It was very pleasant. But it was pleasant precisely because of the absence of ego. That is, sleep we all love to sleep. Sleep is a state that we all love. Why do we love it? Because it is a state of perfect happiness. And why is it a state of perfect happiness? because the cause of all unhappiness is ego. So in the absence of ego, what remains is what we actually are, which is infinite happiness. So as ego, we have some idea about sleep, but because that is what exists and shines in sleep is only the pure awareness I am. Because we're not aware of ourselves as that pure awareness I am now, we're aware of ourselves as that pure awareness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So the same false identification that causes us to be not aware of ourselves as we actually are now, causes us now to be not aware of what we actually were, what we actually experienced ourselves as in sleep. What exists in sleep is just pure awareness. That pure awareness means the awareness I am. When we rise from sleep, we identify ourselves as I am this person. And as this person, as such, as this adjunct conflated awareness called ego, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually were in sleep, as we actually were aware of ourselves as we were in sleep. Sorry, it's not very, it's a bit difficult to express it clearly. But what I'm trying to say is the same ignorance that prevents, that is the ignorance that prevents us knowing ourselves as we actually are now, is the false identification, I am this body. Because we are now experiencing ourselves as this body, this person, we are not aware of ourselves as we cannot recollect what we experienced ourselves as in sleep, because what we experienced ourselves as in sleep was just the pure awareness I am, which is what is now concealed by ego, the false awareness I am this person, I am this body. I don't know if that's a clear answer to that question. So we do recollect the happiness of sleep, but we don't have a clear recollection of it because it's clouded by this false identification, which didn't exist in sleep but does exist now, or seems to exist now.
That sense of remembering that we were asleep is a very subtle sense.
It's a very subtle sense, but we all know, we all have a very clear, we all know we were in a state in which we weren't aware of anything. And we all know that was a very pleasant state. We didn't have any problems there. There was no suffering or anything. So it's a state that we all relish.
Is there a subtle difference between self-investigation and self-abidance, as one evokes a sense of looking, while the other a sense of resting, or are they one and the same?
They're one and the same. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside and remain in the state of being. That state of being is what is called self-abidance. So to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby abiding as ourself.
Another question has popped up also, maybe it's a quick one to answer.
Can I just say a little bit more in that? That is, whatever words we use to describe the practice of self-investigation are inadequate. When you say it's a state of looking, yes, metaphorically we say we can describe self-investigation as looking at ourselves. But it's not one thing looking at another thing. We look at ourselves just by being ourselves. That is, when we attend to something other than ourselves, It's a movement of our mind away from ourselves towards that other thing. When we attend to ourself alone, we are remaining in our source. So it is self-attentiveness is quite unlike attending to anything else. Because attending to anything else is a mental activity. Attending to ourself is a state of just being as we actually are. Yeah, that's all. Was there some other question?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. This may be a quick one, and then there's one which I'm not sure what the content is. Can antipsychotic medicine affect ability to realize pure awareness?
No, that is in the waking, in sleep, obviously we cannot investigate ourselves, because in sleep there's no mind or ego to investigate ourselves. There's only pure being. So it's only in waking and dream that we can investigate ourselves. Taking that is, it may be necessary sometimes for if there's certain mental conditions that can be treated by drugs. Sometimes there may be antipsychotic drugs that will help to keep the mind in a state of balance. So if the mind is kept in a state of balance by those drugs, that balanced mind can then turn its attention within. So there's no reason why taking antipsychotic drugs should prevent us investigating what we are. Even supposing we're taking some hallucinatory drugs, in old days they had that back in the 60s and 70s they had LSD, which was a hallucinatory drug. And there are also things, magic mushrooms, all sorts of things. I don't know much about these things, but even if you're taking these things, you may be in a state of hallucination. But if you want to investigate yourself, you can still investigate yourself. Who is experiencing all these hallucinations? We can turn our attention back to ourselves. So in any state of waking or dream, if we want to, we can turn our attention back to ourselves. Because whatever we experience, whether it's so-called real, like what we're experiencing now, we take this to be real, or whether we take it to be a hallucination, there has to be an experiencer for any experience. So drugs may create all sorts of experiences. If we are interested in the experiences, our mind will be going outwards. But if we're interested in knowing, who am I, the experiencer of all these things, we can turn our mind within. So taking these drugs probably won't be, many drugs may not be helpful, but sometimes certain psychotic drugs it may be necessary, antipsychotic drugs, it may be necessary to take those, or we'd be in a state of mental imbalance. So we shouldn't conclude that we can't investigate ourselves just because we're taking some drugs. As far as possible, it's better to avoid drugs, but if it's necessary, we should take it and continue investigating ourselves.
Did Ramana see any value in music as a form of bhakti? Did he himself enjoy music?
Yeah, but Bhagavan, in the early days when Bhagavan was living on the hill, they often used to recite Tiruvasakam, songs of Devaram. Bhagavan would also join in. Bhagavan often joined in singing. So yes, and Bhagavan composed songs. I mean, Aksharamlaya and other songs of Stuti Panchakam, they designed to be sung. And when people were singing Aksharamlai, Bhagavan was often very visibly moved when people were singing other devotional songs of Tiruvasakam and so on, or Murugan's songs and so on. Bhagavan was often very visibly moved by these songs. So these things do have a value, certainly.
Well, I wonder where the tune came from for Ramana Maharshi, whether that could have come from Bhagavan.
I think, well, different people have sung it in different ways. I mean, it can be, but because it's poetry, it lends itself to being sung. But I don't know whether Bhagavan actually ever anyone. I mean, if devotees were singing it, Bhagavan may have joined in, but I don't know. I've not read anything about Bhagavan singing it. So I think there's no particular tune is specified for it. So musicians can set it to different tunes.
I think that seems to be it.
Right.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, well, thank you.
On behalf of everybody.
And thank you everyone for the questions.